Okay, a big thank you to Josh. That was awesome. And I've already had the turn over the keys conversation with my kids. That's not the problem with me right now. It's the ladder. They don't want me to get on a ladder. I'm like, come on. I'm in a home fellowship group. A guy a year or two older than me, he falls off his ladder, and it's curtains for the rest of us. Like, how do I do Christmas stuff without a ladder? So next time you can put in, at what age can you not get on a ladder anymore? Hey, but we're going to look at estate planning, okay? And some of the things that Josh talked about in general, we're going to dig deep into some of those. And these are things that your parents should be doing, and some of these things you should do. And so, same disclaimer, not a lawyer, not a CPA, just a guy that's kind of learned a lot that God's allowed me to share with you tonight. My father died when I was 33. He was 58. And I learned a lot from that. And then I started working at Compass Bible Church doing financial things, including counseling. And one day, a guy in my men's Bible study group that I was in an accountability relationship with him, he died. And his wife comes into my office. And of course, when your husband dies, you're emotionally distraught. You're not thinking well. But she says, I have no idea what to do. I have no idea what to do. And so I said, you're going to gather your mail and you're going to come into me every Thursday. And we're going to look at what it is you have, what your income levels are, what you're spending. She goes, I've never written a check. I don't know anything. And God just allowed me to work with her. We had a staff person die during COVID. I worked with his family to help through that. But hopefully we have some things in here that will help you. So the first thing I like to look at is, well, what is estate planning? And I go back to the dictionary. And it says the arranging for the disposition and management of one's estate at death through the use of wills, trust, insurance policies, and other devices. So that's the worldly look at it. ChatGPT says an estate is the total collection of a person's property, rights, and obligations that exist at the time of their death and must be managed, transferred, or settled. So that's really what we're talking about. When we get to the end of your life and you pass away, you have an estate. If you're the second to die, if you're the first to die, everything goes to your spouse. If you're single or you die, what happens with all your stuff? Technical terms, that's called an estate. Now, let's put some things out at the beginning. In California, they have small estates and large estates. If your estate value is under $208,000, $850, that's a small estate. You don't need to have a will. You don't need to have a trust. You don't really need to do anything as far as the state of California goes. You still have stuff, and you still want your heirs, whoever they are, to know what to do with it. What are you going to do with the old truck sitting in the back of the garage? I mean, who gets that? Or if you have a home, who's going to sell the house? And what happens with the stuff inside of it? There's still issues of responsibility that you should have for yourself, and if you're helping your parents, help them through that. But in California, small estate, $208,850. They've also come up with a simplified transfer for your home if it's worth $750,000 or less. I don't know who wrote this. They didn't live in Orange County. But if it is $750,000 or less, you can do the simple transfer. If it's over that, then there's reasons to save money on taxes by doing a sophisticated estate plan. And back when my father died, when I was 33, the numbers for the estate plans were $600,000. So if there's an estate that's worth more than $600,000, you pay estate taxes when you die. The old adage, what's certain in life? Death and taxes. The IRS is going to tax you on whatever the value of your estate was when you pass away. Well, when my dad passed away, it was $600,000. Good news for you today, it's $15 million for a single person, or $30 million if you're married. So, I want to encourage everybody that has, every married couple here that has an estate worth more than $30 million to pay close attention to what we're going to talk about, because you can save money by doing this properly. And you need to talk to a lawyer. In fact, you're already talking to a lawyer because you're making that kind of money and everybody in your circles are telling you to do that. But you can save money on taxes. 15 million, 30 million. Those are IRS taxes. State taxes are different. We're not going to go into those. But I just wanted you to give a feel for, I can save money on my taxes, my estate taxes, if I do this sophisticated plan. No, not really, unless you have a lot of assets. We're going to skip that for today. One of the things that we have to talk about, though, when we talk about an estate plan, remember that's all your stuff. And one of the things you have to do is decide who gets it all. Right? Who does it go to? And I say there's two categories. We have relatives. You should give your estate to relatives. And then you should give your estate to not to relatives. It should go to somebody else or some other institution. Relatives and not relatives. So let's look to see if this is biblical or not. So there's lots of examples. I have several of them here. But if you're going to leave your estate to a relative, we can look at Proverbs 13:22a that says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. So the practice then was you'd leave your money to your grandchildren. Or we can look at Job 42:15. And it says, in all the land there were no women as are so beautiful as Job's daughters, and their father gave them an inheritance among their brothers. So here, Job is giving his estate, his cattle, his ranches, everything that he had, to his sons and his daughters. So, children, boys and girls, it's a good thing to leave an estate to them. So, relatives, leave to your kids and to your grandkids. Those are biblical patterns that we see in Scripture. In Proverbs 19:14a, house and wealth are inherited from fathers. You all know the prodigal son parable. What did the prodigal son say to his dad? Give me my inheritance now. Give me my inheritance now. And we saw what happened when you got the inheritance early. He went and squandered it all. That's a spiritual application, but the practical application is they had inheritances and they were giving them, some of them during their life. They didn't wait until they passed away. So we have some passages where funds are given not to relatives. In fact, Lamentations, the lament, says, our inheritance has been turned over to strangers, our homes to foreigners. So here's an example where you thought you were going to leave it to your family, and something geopolitical happens, and guess what? You leave it to strangers. Ecclesiastes 6:2. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires, yet God does not give him power to enjoy them. So some of you, when you think about your estate, you think, oh man, I'm just going to build it up and then I'm going to enjoy life sometime. Circumstances can change in a moment like this, and all this planning that you've done is to no effect. Yeah, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. It's a grievous evil. Ecclesiastes 4:8. One person has no other, either son or daughter, yet there is no end to all his toil, and his eyes are never satisfied with riches, so that he never asks, for whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? This also is vanity and unhappy business. So if you're working 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week, 100 hours a week, you have no heirs, this passage is telling you to think about that. Why are you doing that? Maybe you should be more involved in ministry and not trying to build up this big kingdom. This is the primary text I want to look at too, at least at this point, is Luke 12:13-21. And just to remind you, I want to read the passages so they're relevant to us. So someone in the crowd said to him, Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Again, we see inheritance going to brothers. But Jesus said to him, man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you? He's coming in saying, I'm not going to tell you how to do this. I'm not going to arbitrate between them. And he said to them, take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. So Christ is trying to move them off of, teacher, tell my brother to divide it up with me. And he's trying to say, you should be looking at kingdom issues, not necessarily doing this all the time. They had an overemphasis on it. And then he added to that in verse 15. So then he said, take care and be on, I already did that. 16, he tells a parable. So he told them, I'm not going to arbitrate between you. Don't be focused on this all the time. And then he tells them this parable. The land of a rich man produced plentifully. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. That's what he said to himself. Look at all that I've accomplished on my own. I'm ready to be done. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will it be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. Started with a family dispute. Jesus says, I'm not going to judge that. He gives 2 warnings. Watch out for covetousness and the abundance of possessions. These are real life warnings that we need to think about as we start thinking about our estates and what happens to them. Land of the rich man, he scaled up too fast. He did a real estate development project. He had worldly success. He said to his own soul, this is cool. And God said, you fool, your life is over, your plans didn't work, and who's going to inherit your stuff? So let's keep that in perspective as we look at this. This is a passage, too, where his estate it didn't go to relatives because it says, who's going to inherit it? All right, with that as a backdrop, we're going to look at why do we plan? And I have several reasons as to why we plan. One, we got to maximize giving. We're going to grow in the grace of giving. We talked about 2 Corinthians 8. If you want to grow in your giving, then when you do your estate planning, you ought to think about, how can I maximize my giving in my estate? How can I use every dollar that comes into my bank account or into my possession? How can I use it to give glory to God in some way? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the orderly process for winding up our affairs. Some of you that are a little older have seen people die, and you've seen the fights and the problems in relationships where when money gets involved and everybody wants all their money, and it can be crazy. I think Michael Jackson, died without a will or a trust. And it's been who knows how long to figure out how we're going to divvy all that up. So we want to plan well because we want an orderly process for winding up our affairs. We want to prevent family relationship problems. I've seen it firsthand. You've probably seen it firsthand. And if we can avoid that or prevent it, that would be great. I'm always about minimizing costs. We'll talk about how you can minimize cost in this. We talked about how you can minimize estate taxes, and if you have large estates. So let's look at the orderly process for winding up our affairs. You need to do this, your parents need to do this, but you need to identify all of your assets, all my stuff, and asset stuff that you own. You need to identify all your liabilities, right? And this is a basic little summary. If you all had Accounting 101A, you understand this. So the difference is your estate. And if you're a trustee, that's what your job is to do. You find all the assets, you find all the liabilities, you dispose of the assets, you pay off the liabilities. What's left then gets distributed to beneficiaries. If you kind of keep that in mind, if you're ever asked to be a trustee, that's what your responsibility is. And hopefully in your documents, you're going to select somebody that can do that for you, that you trust and love. Okay, so now this is just my accounting background. I want you to, when you think about what all your assets are, you probably know them all, but I'm going to give you a quick list because there might be some things that you don't know that are assets. So you have your checking accounts, your savings accounts. Maybe you put cash in the mattress. If you come to my house, go to the fridge because they say always have some extra cash. So we put this envelope of cash in our fridge. I don't even know if it's there anymore. Is it still there? Yep. I think it's like, what, $400 or earthquake fund? I don't know. Y2K. Maybe you put it in the garage. You may have investments at brokerage accounts. You may be in a partnership with somebody to build something or to do something or to do a tech thing. There's all kinds of partnerships out there that you've invested in. And I'm trying to give you a sense of how you identify all of your stuff so that your heirs know what you're dealing with. You may have stocks held outside of a brokerage account. My mom gave me 10 shares of Disney stock once, and she handed me the certificate. It's in a folder somewhere. It's not at a brokerage account, but it's worth, I don't know, $8,000 today. And it's like, I got to tell my trustee who handles my estate when I'm done, I got to tell him, that we have that. Currencies, maybe you invested in gold. If you did, you're very happy at the moment because gold has been crazy. Oil and gas, a family-run business. Maybe you have digital currencies. Maybe you have Bitcoin. That great investment in Bitcoin. That's the one where you open your computer someday and there won't be anything there, Bitcoin. Or I could have bought Bitcoin at $1,000 a coin, and now it's what, $85,000 a coin? Again, this is not the investment deal, but if you have Bitcoin, you should put that on your list of assets so when your trustee comes in when you're gone, they know how to get to it because that was your asset. Life insurance, there's no value in a term life insurance because it goes away when you die, but you might have one of these whole life insurance products where there is a cash surrender value to your life insurance. That would be an asset. You might own real property, a primary residence or a second home. Please don't tell me that you have a timeshare because that goes on the liability side of this equation, not on the asset side. So you have personal property, and that's what I call everything else other than real property. And you're going to know what you have more than any of us, more than I would know. Some of your parents may have these things called safety deposit boxes, which you millennials don't even know what that is. But if you had a safety deposit box with something in it of great value, it's got to go on a list somewhere that you leave, so whoever's handling your affairs, they know where that is. You may have cars and trucks, jewelry, paintings, musical instruments. When my mom died, she had a piano. Nobody wants pianos anymore. It's one of these little stand-up ones. I mean, it was hard to get rid of it. And she didn't tell us who to give it to or what to do with it. Would have been great if she said, oh yeah, give the piano to this nonprofit over here, or do this or do that. But that's an asset on your list as you're developing these lists. You may have receivables from maybe your children. Maybe one of your kids got in trouble, you loan them money, and if you want to try to be equal when you set up your estate, you need to tell your trustee, you need to put on your list, well, I loaned Johnny $10,000 so he could go to college. He was going to pay me back. He hasn't paid me back. So when you settle up, give him $10,000 less. They're never going to know that if you haven't written it down and documented it somewhere. Maybe you did it to Uncle Elliot. You loaned him money so you get a new car, or coworkers, or neighbors, or friends. I just worry about these receivables sometime, that they just get lost in the shuffle. And in a sense, that's not the right thing to do. Intellectual property, maybe you have patents or trademarks or copyrights, trade secrets, logos that you've designed, images, books, industrial designs, all kinds of things. Hopefully, after I talk to you about retirement plans, you're participating now in your 401k or 403b. You have an IRA, either tax-deferred or Roth. We spoke a little bit about that. If you're the first to die, I hope this remaining spouse knows how to get a hold of the company that you have a pension with. And if you had somewhere in a folder, you should put all this in a folder or on a hard drive somewhere in the cloud so that, oh yeah, in the example of this lady I helped for a year to get on her feet, she knew there was pension plan money coming in for her husband, but she didn't know even who it was. That's why looking at the mail helps out after the fact. If he had left a detailed list, it would have made life easier as we went along. Liabilities, unpaid bills, credit card debt, mortgages, promissory notes, car payments, student loans. Hopefully when you die at 85, you don't have any student loans left. IRS debts. I was talking to somebody up in Boise when I did this at our Boise church, and he told me that his in-laws decided not to file income tax returns anymore because it was unconstitutional to file an income tax return. And I'm like, that never works, folks. They're going to find you, and you're going to have penalties and interest. And if you're the trustee for a trust, you're going to have to look and see if they've paid all their income taxes. And if there's 5 or 6 years worth of income taxes, and you took all your assets minus all your liabilities, what's left over, and you distribute it to the beneficiaries, then you find out you have a $100,000 liability to the IRS. You know who pays that if you're the trustee? You do, because you distributed the money when you shouldn't have. Now, maybe you can get it back from all the beneficiaries, but if there's 25 beneficiaries and they took their money and ran, it's going to be hard to get them. So IRS debt's just something that you should look at as a potential liability. So now we're going to talk about the documents I want you to have, and we're going to start out with the written documents. So every one of you in this room should have one of these or all of these. I want you to have a last will and testament. Number 1. Number 2, if you own a home or your estate's worth more than $208,000, I really want you to have a revocable living trust because it's just easier and a smarter way to go. I want all of you to have advanced healthcare directives. And I would like you all to have powers of attorney signed where you give the power of attorney to somebody you trust to manage things when you can't. To me, these are must-have, and they're written. Then I have some recommended written documents. One is a letter of instruction. These are for things that you can leave so your beneficiaries can see them and the trustee can see them, and you can go over how you want certain things taken care of. And I have a list of things that we can talk about when we get to that. I think you should put your latest income tax return in that folder. Wherever you do it, you should scan it in so the trustee and your beneficiaries can look at your income tax return and see what it looked like so they don't miss anything, like income items. Maybe they had income in their tax return that you had no idea what it was. If you had their tax return, that would be helpful. You should have proof of identity documents. So my dad dies at 58. My mom dies at 82, 83. I go into the bank and say, I'm the trustee of my parents' trust, and I want to open a bank account under the name of the trust, and my mom and my dad are dead, and here's my mom's death certificate. And they say, great, where's your dad's? I have no idea. But I gave them the trust document. It said, Donald and Ruth Talcott. Ruth Talcott just died. I had the death certificate. Where's your dad's? I said, I don't know. So the banker said, well, did he die in Orange County? Yes. Oh, well, just go down to this office in Laguna Hills, pay your $20, and you get a death certificate. I said, really? So I did. I went down and I got it, and I got the death certificate. I went back. I could open the bank account. They wouldn't let me open a trust account as the trustee until they knew both of them were dead. From their perspective, they would say, how do I know your dad's dead? Maybe you just want to come in here and pilfer all this money. So if you had a death certificate and it was like that, or maybe one of your parents lived in Louisiana, and then how are you going to get that? And you can't open the bank account. You can't do anything. You can't even pay utility bills on the house. So if you had a death certificate, both copies, that would help. Title and property deeds, not so much in our country because we have title companies. Digital logins. Do you have a list of all your passwords somewhere? So the trustee can go in and look at this stuff firsthand. Be really great if you put that in a recommended written document. And then funeral arrangements. Be great to lay out your funeral arrangements. We had a memorial service last Saturday, and there were 500 people there, and this is a gal that had been in the church, and her and her husband, they planned her funeral a year before she died. And they said, this person's going to do the eulogy, this is going to do the family background, another eulogy, we're going to sing this song, we're going to sing this song, this person's going to do the prayer, Pastor Mike's going to do the message, and then we're going to do this. They had already done all of that work. And you guys are looking at me and say, I'm too young to even think about that. Okay, well, what about your parents? Have they planned out their funeral? And they should, and you should have the talk, and you should talk about this, because then that's going to make it easy when they do pass. Okay, let's talk about documents. If you don't have some of those documents on my must-have, or they're unclear, someone's going to step in and wrap up your affairs. And that's called intestate succession. And that's not necessarily what you think it is. So when you die, if you don't have any of these documents and you have money, more than $200,000 in the bank, who decides? So you get to petition the court. You go down to Santa Ana, you go into the probate court, and you say, hi, my mom died, I'm the only child, I want to become the personal representative, and I want to handle my parents' estate. But maybe a nephew comes in and says, I was talking to my grandma, and she said I was going to handle the estate, so I want to petition the court, I want to handle the estate. And then somebody else may come in, and somebody else may come in. And in California, there's an ordering. They're going to go through and they're going to say, well, it first goes to this person, and then it goes to this person. If that person isn't there, it goes up to this person, and it's wild. So it's just, I want you to do the documents so you're doing it orderly, right? You're doing this orderly. You don't create confusion for the people that are left behind. Your personal representative may be people that you never even knew. You may not have ever even known them. So I would suggest that you should know them, and they may not share your values. Can't read this too well, but this is Jesse Beck. And I'm pretty sure that nobody in this room knows who Jesse Beck is, right? That's good. Well, Jesse Beck died. I'll tell you why. He had no will, and he had no trust document. So the estate goes through this Montana court system, ends up at the Supreme Court, by the way. And a child petitions the court to be the personal representative. It's kind of a normal thing. He was divorced. He had a wife, but they were divorced, and he had a child. The child comes in and says, I want to be the personal representative. Well, Jesse's brother, Jason, submits a video from Jesse's cell phone recorded 4 days before his death. So can't you just picture Jesse sitting there, and he pulls out his cell phone, and he says, my name is Jesse Beck, and this is what I want done with my estate. I want everything to go to my brother. I don't want any of it to go to anybody else. My brother gets it all. In fact, this is what it said. I, Jesse Beck, give all of my possessions. If anything happens to me whatsoever, I give all my possessions, everything to Jason Beck, my brother. Christina does not get one thing, not one thing. Click, sends it to his brother. 4 days later, he dies. It's a tragic thing. He pulled over to help somebody that was in trouble. A police car came by and killed them both. The people in trouble, and they killed him. And so the daughter says, I want to be the personal representative. But Jason comes in and says, whoa, whoa, whoa. Look, here's the video he gave me 4 days before he died. Who wins? Who wins? The court rules against him. So you millennials, when I say these have to be written documents, they have to be written documents. You can't do this. Well, my dad told me I got the farm. He had guns, and there's $400,000 worth of guns. And the brother wanted the guns, but it had to go into the estate. Guns were sold. The proceeds went in intestate succession in the order that Montana said, and he fought it all the way up to the Supreme Court, and he lost. The same thing is true in California. and in most states. Okay, so the last will. And I see here, I didn't change Idaho to California. I did this in California, and then I did it in Idaho. But we're back in California, but the wording's the same. I changed the state of California. But this is easy. It's an easy, simple little document. I, Rick Talcott, resident of the city of San Clemente, county of Orange, state of California. I'm the testator. I am being of sound mind. I'm doing all these things. The document is easy. So let's talk about the terms. Testator is you. The executor is who you're assigning to take care of your stuff when you're gone. You devise and bequeath the real and personal property. You have to have successor trustees. Okay, so for me, I have 4 children, and if I say, well, this one is going to be my executor, what happens if he's not living? What if he and I die in the same thing? So they want to have successors, and you should plan well to do that. It has to be witnessed. It doesn't have to be notarized, and it goes through probate. So what's probate? Well, let's go through. I guess we talked about most of this, but I'll come back to probate in a second. Name an executive, identify your children. Their names go in it, and you name the guardians. You have 2 children, Josh. Was it 2 or 3? 2? You have 5 kids. Where do they go when you die? Brother-in-law takes them all. You're going to split them up. He gets them all. We had 4. We sent all of ours together. And those are hard decisions you're going to have to think about, right? But you know what? You could die on the way home tonight. And if you don't have anything, it goes to your husband first, but if you both die, it's a mess. Because the court might look at it and say it's too much to have 5 people go to your brother. And so name guardians for your children and your pets. You don't have to name your pets, but the world names their pets. Identify your beneficiaries, right? This is who gets what. Identify the real and personal property and which beneficiaries receive what. There's a bunch of legal stuff. And then there's this thing called probate. If all you have is a will and your estate is worth more than $208,850, you go through a court-ordered, in the state of California, probate process. In California, that could take 12 to 24 months, depending on how complicated your estate is. There are rigid steps before the court will approve the disposition of any money to beneficiaries until they know all the debts and the liabilities have been satisfied. 12 to 14 months. What would it cost? I know you can't read this, but I'll tell you that the top line. If your estate had a value of $1 million, the attorneys can only charge a certain amount of money to handle that estate. In this case, it's $23,000. This particular chart that I pulled up, probably from ChatGPT, also says the executor fee. Whoever's handling this for you, if you have $1 million of assets, you should pay him some money while he's having to do all this work. Because he's got a job, he's got kids, he's got demands of his own, and now on top of that, they're going to sell your house and your trucks and your cars, all that stuff. They should take a fee. So it could be very expensive. It could be $46,000. If you have a $10 million estate, it could be $200,000. So I don't like probate. I don't like you paying the fees. I don't like taking 12 to 14 months, going before a judge, saying this is what we did. The judge stamps it and says, okay, you can do that. It takes a long time. What I really want you to do is I want you to do a revocable living trust. They don't go through probate. So they're not public documents. Nobody sees it. You go through probate. Those are public documents. Anybody can look at your estate, see who you gave the money to, and sometimes that just is not comfortable. So it doesn't go through probate. It's more comprehensive than a will. There's more legalese, but they have the same things. But they call them grantors, trustees, and beneficiaries. Otherwise, it's a document that gets created upon the death of you or your parents. It's going to require you to put things in the name of the trust. We use a fancy word called vesting, okay? But if you have a revocable living trust and you have a home, you want to put your home into the trust, which means the title on the deed changes from what it is today into the trust document. You really need to do that. You should do that on your checking accounts. If you have a checking account, it should be the Talcott Family Trust, not the Talcott Family Trust, whatever you name yours, should be in the name of the trust. It's called vesting. That way, when the death happens and you're the trustee that handles all this, You can just step in and you can go to the bank and you can say, I'm the trustees, here's the death certificates, I want to open an account, and you're off and running. You don't go through probate, you don't have to go to Orange County and talk to a judge. You do the distribution of the net assets. If you're the trustee, you have a fiduciary responsibility to do exactly what's in the document. Same thing for the will. I talked to somebody a month ago that said, thinking about who my trustee should be, and my oldest, he doesn't always follow all the rules. He's kind of loose. He spends money a little loose. And my daughter, she's the one that has all the detail, but they don't get along, and I don't know who to pick. Well, really it shouldn't matter, because the trustee can only do what the trust document says. So if it says give 30% to the church and give the rest of the money to my 3 kids, that's what has to be done. And if they don't do that, there could be some legal issues along the way where they're not acting in the best interest of the beneficiaries. So fiduciaries have some responsibilities in the document, and they have to be in writing. You can put guardian designations down, so you can put that in your revocable living trust. These 5 kids go to my brother. Our 4 went out of state, because at the time, they were the best Christian family that we knew of, and we wanted them to raise our kids. A notary is required. It allows for that great tax planning, which we talked about. Amendments are easy. You still need a will. If you go to any lawyer to do a revocable living trust, they automatically give you a will. It's called a pour-over will. In my experiences, all the pour-over will says is, if I forgot to put something in my trust, I meant to put it in my trust. So act as if it was in my trust. And so they like to do that because maybe you'll do your revocable living trust and there'll be things that you don't even own or have. Like you open up a new account after that and you forgot to put it in the name. We'll talk about that as well. The details remain private. And then once the first to die under a trust, it becomes irrevocable. These are revocable living trusts, which means you could do all of this and then you could decide 10 years later, say, I don't want to do that anymore. And you can go in and you can change it all. No probate. No probate, no 12 to 24 months in California. And the trustee should be paid. So then I talked to you about beneficiary designations. When you go and you open a bank account or a brokerage account, one of the forms you fill out, it's a hassle, isn't it? You go open a new account, you got to fill out all these forms. It says, who's your beneficiary? And you may just put your 2 kids. They're the beneficiaries. Even though you have a trust and you wanted that bank account to go into the trust. If that bank account or brokerage account is significant and you die, the beneficiary designation that you put in when you open that account, that prevails. So even if your trust said, I want this bank account or this $2 million brokerage account to be in my trust, if you didn't do that when you opened up the bank account or brokerage account, that's a problem, and the banks won't let the money go to the trust because what they have, which is legally binding with them, says it goes to the kids. Same thing for life insurance. You say you don't have any life insurance. Your employer may have life insurance for you. Same thing for the retirement plans. You know, the beneficiary in the retirement plan. Those can be outside of the trust. And actually, life insurance can be outside of the trust because it's non-taxable. Somebody dies, you collect on the life insurance, they pay no tax on the life insurance. But you should think about your beneficiaries and making sure whatever you put in your revocable living trust is the same thing you put when you have those assets. Advanced healthcare directives answers the question, who gives medical direction if you can? I love Josh's, we're not making decisions in the emergency room, right? You prepare a document, it's called an advanced healthcare directive. You're telling everybody in advance, I want this person, my wife, to make all of my medical decisions if I'm in a coma and I can't function myself. And the doctors want to know that. Hospitals want to know that. Sometimes pharmacies want to know that. Included in that is something called a DNR. How many have heard of DNR? Oh, look at this. Everybody knows. Do not resuscitate. That's part of this advanced healthcare directive. If I've been laying in the hospital for 6 months, I'm probably out of money because Medicare doesn't pay for all of that. And I have a heart attack. Do you want me to be resuscitated, or do you just want to go see with Jesus? Because that's what you wanted anyway, because you've had this deadly disease for a long time. So that's in the advanced healthcare directive. Sometimes if you don't do this, I'm telling you, you should do it. If you don't do it, the hospital has a form. And if they think that's a possibility, they'll say, hey, you got to sign this, and you got to tell us. He's in ICU, he's been in ICU. If he has a heart attack, do we let him go? Or do we try to revive him? So they have their forms, but it's better to put it in the formal document. And these are standardized documents. May come up in hospice. It's for adults only. Funny story there. When my oldest son turned 18, at 17 years and 11 months and 28 days, he had a mole removed from his back to biopsy it. Biopsy came back, I don't know, a week later. They call the home. Is David Talcott there? No, he's not. Well, this is the dermatology office. We would like to talk to him. Oh, well, you can talk to me. Actually, this is my wife having the conversation. You can talk to me. Was it cancer? Oh, we can't tell you. He's 18. HIPAA doesn't allow us to disclose that information to you as a parent. We said, wait a minute. I paid to bring him here. It's my insurance. You're getting paid from me. I don't really care how old he is. But it doesn't work. So a lot of people have said every time their kid turns 18, they're going to have them do an advanced healthcare directive. So if anything ever happens, they have it ready, and you can find out what's wrong, and then you can give advice to the medical profession. Okay, I said I wanted you to do a power of attorney. A power of attorney will let you act in the place on all matters. So if I gave Pastor Elliott my power of attorney, and it's a general power of attorney, and I say, I'm assigning everything to you, he could do anything I can do legally. Anything. Buy and sell stocks. Sell my house. Sell my car. Buy an airplane. Whatever it was. I don't have an airplane. I don't want an airplane. But now he acts in the same position and place that I have. He can make every decision. That's a general power of attorney. What is most common is a limited power of attorney. And these, you can act in your place on restricted or certain matters. And usually there's a little checklist of things, like one of them is financial. So I give a power of attorney to somebody. Let's say my wife is gone, and I'm living, and I want my kids to help me with all my financial stuff. I can give them a financial power of attorney so they can act as me in every financial area of life. So you should think about having those, because believe it or not, those come in handy. I told you about the letter of instructions. And these are usually for low-value items. Technically, they're not legally binding if somebody wants to sue. But they're to include like heirlooms or keepsakes. You know, that was Mom's bowl that she used every Thanksgiving. And, you know, I'm going to put a letter of instruction that says, this goes to my youngest daughter because she loved that bowl more than anybody else. And my oldest daughter, she loved the quilt, you know, that somebody made. So you can write these things out for low-value items to help the trustee do what they need to do as they dispose of all of your assets. And this could be fairly helpful. I've known people that have identified all the artwork in their house, not that they have a whole lot of artwork, but they say, this one goes to kid 1, this one goes to kid 2, this one goes to kid 3, this one goes to kid 4. And how helpful would that be for you if you were the trustee? Instead of everybody walking in and say, well, I want that one. Well, Mom said, you know, not legally binding, but Mom said that should really go to somebody else. But she gave you this one. It would just be so helpful. And it's in this letter of instruction. Maybe there's china. Maybe there's sports equipment. Maybe there's an ice machine. Maybe you've had an ice machine in your garage all your life, and you wanted that to go to Matt Fabarez. Is he here? Where did he go? Maybe you inherit the ice machine because you said, I love that ice machine, man. I was in the garage all the time. It was so awesome. If you want it to go to somebody, put it in a letter of instruction because it's probably not worth much because it's 20 years old. It's probably a liability, but maybe the kid wants the ice machine. Equipment, furniture, electronics, tools, sewing machine, quilts, maybe your surfboards. People don't surf up here, okay. Or your guns. Guess if you're Rick Ruland, it's all of your fishing gear. I don't know. That's a letter of instruction. I have some other observations. If you do all this work like I've told you to do, you need to put it all in one place or scan it in electronically, and then you need to tell people where they are. Because what good is all your plans if you haven't told your heirs where to find it? However you document all this, and I want you to be comprehensive, let's at least tell them where it is. That would help. And we didn't talk a lot about this, but you should discuss the documents with your beneficiaries beforehand, because I think that would just be helpful, right? If I gave 25% to this kid, 25% to this kid, 25% to this kid, and 10% to this kid, and the rest to the church, the guy that got 10%, he's a beneficiary. He'll know all the other information. It won't be public, but the beneficiaries will know. And that kid might wonder, what happened to me? Why did I not get equal with everybody else? And while it would be hard, like Josh said, but I recommend you tell them why they're alive so they don't create all these magical, mystical, bad things about you. And if there are some rough things there, you can tell them why you did it. Or you can tell them the other one needed it more than you did. You made your $1 million and they're living at the poverty level. They deserve more. Whatever you decide to do, and we're not here to tell you that, but you should tell them. I would even give them copies. So there's no secrets and no surprises. This is what's going to happen. I would discuss the composition of your estate. I think I was telling some people here, my dad died when he was 58. He had a complicated estate. And if he had spent 2 hours with me before he died, it could have saved me hundreds of hours. Because he was in some real estate partnership deals, and I didn't know what they were. I didn't have any idea what they were, what the values were. And now I'm dealing with all these people that I don't necessarily know that well. It just can be helpful. For husband and wife, and you own a home, and the first dies, I want you to get an appraisal on your home. You can do that with a regular appraiser. You can do it if you have a real estate buddy who's got a brokerage or an agent. He's an agent. They can appraise homes as well. If you bought your home for $150,000 and it's worth $1 million, when the first person dies in a family, and you get that appraised, now the new cost of your home is $1 million. It's not the $150,000 that you paid for it. So if you sold a home just before you died, you have capital gains tax of $850,000, and I want to minimize taxes for you. So don't sell your home if you're about to die, don't sell your home. Go ahead and die, get an appraisal, and that becomes its new cost. So then your wife, if she sells it for $1,110,000, she only has $10,000 of gain that she has to pay income tax on. So get an appraisal of anything of value on the day of the first death. Because it's called step up in basis. It becomes the new cost of that asset. And you can save money by doing that. I had slides in with all those statistics of how many of you out there have really done this. And like Josh said, not very many of you have done this. And you got all excuses why. My estate isn't big enough. I don't have time. I don't really know what I want to do with it. And you're going to create chaos. So there's a website called freewill.com. They will do a will for you. In California, they will do a trust for you. They will do an advanced healthcare directive for you. And they will do a durable financial power of attorney. Put trust in there twice. You know what it costs? Nothing. It's free. It's like TurboTax. How many use TurboTax to do their tax return? You sit there and you say, put in the W-2. They ask you questions, and you answer the questions. Now, it can be hard because you have to make decisions. If you have married children and they have kids, and they get a fourth, like in our family maybe, give to the church and give your kids 25% of what's left. What happens if my son is dead when I die? Does it go to the wife or does it go to the grandkids? In our culture, it goes to the grandkids. Now, when you're married, Christ sees you as one. And when I first thought about this, I'm thinking, that's weird. I mean, I love my granddaughter. I take her in my own home as if she was mine. Why wouldn't I let her have all of that? Well, the culture says she's going to remarry. If you give her the money, she's going to take your money. She's going to go off with a new guy, and who knows what's going to happen with your kids. So give it to your kids, and then she kind of becomes the guardian for the kids, so she can use that money to continue to maintain and help along the way. You're going to have to make decisions like that. And some of those get kind of funny. And if you happen to be divorced and remarried, it gets even more complicated. But if you have an easy life, I would just urge you, freewill.com. You can go to LegalZoom. I think they charge you $250 to do the trust. They'll do it. Dave Ramsey has this mamabear.com. Go to Mama Bear. Theirs was a little more expensive. It was like $500. And there's others out there. Ethos. I mean, you can just Google it. You could also go to a paralegal because they're a little bit more cost efficient. You could do all of these documents for $1,500. And it's good paralegal. They can't give you legal advice, but you could walk in and say, I want these documents, and this is exactly what I want them to say. And they'll produce the documents for you. And they might even say, well, you told me to do this, and I just want you to know that when I do this, this is what will happen, and I think maybe you probably thought that. Do you want to tell me to do this? And for most of us, that's good enough. If you have a large estate, then you need to talk to a lawyer. You just need to talk to a lawyer because you don't want to get this wrong. You want to make sure you do it right. I used this earlier, Deuteronomy 8:18. You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, that he may confirm his covenant that he swore to your fathers as it is this day. So here's my 7 things, if you haven't already written them down. Did you get a will in place? If you have an estate at all, or your parents have an estate at all, you should do a revocable living trust. You should do your advanced health care. Get it done. Write out your instruction letter. Before my grandpa died, we were in the garage. He goes, I think I want your dad to have this saw. So I'm going to put a sticky on it. And if I die, I want your dad to have that saw. I never really found out whether that happened or not. But if you put it in a letter with all your other documents, knowing that the trustee can say, my dad doesn't get that saw, at least the trustees knows, well, Dad wanted him to have the saw. Give him the saw. When I was up at Boise, I said, yeah, guns. Somebody raised their hands. Well, I got a lot of guns. You said it isn't legally binding. Well, he probably had $100,000 worth of guns. I'm not talking about that. Anything of any value has to go and be split, whatever you say in your document. But if you could write out that would be awesome. Have a safe place to store it. Remember and tell people where it is. 3 of my 4 kids live out of state. 1 lives in Simi Valley. They know where the documents are. We keep a bunch of our stuff on QuickBooks. We give them the password so they can get into the computer, and we give them the password so they can open QuickBooks. And then they can see what they're doing. Be as comprehensive and complete as you can. Then finally, I'd really encourage you to be generous with God. We've talked a lot about that and throughout all of these. I know some of you have been great givers while you've been alive. Maybe you should really reconsider being a great giver when you pass away. Remember, God gave this all to you. He would like it to be used for kingdom purposes. So hypothetically, not even hypothetically, 2 months ago, before I even thought about doing any of this, I mentioned to a guy in men's Bible study that I don't understand why people leave their net worth to their unsaved children, because that's not kingdom work. They'll never use those proceeds for kingdom work. Never's too strong. They could be saved, and then they would use it for kingdom purposes. He came back to me a year later. He said, "Do you remember when we were walking in the hallway and you told me that story? That just burned in my wife's heart and my heart, because we have a kid like that. He won't talk to us. He hates our Christianity, and I don't trust that whatever we leave him will ever be used for kingdom purposes again." We wrote him out, and we told him. And we told him why. Now that's a little tougher, right? I might say, they're still your kids, you could leave them something, but for all you know, they're going to go make donations to Planned Parenthood. So now God's money, who he gave to you to steward you, is being spent in a way that you're not very happy about, and you would never spend your money that way, ever. So I would suggest that you be generous with God, you be careful. When people ask me now, I say you should give something to your kids because they're your kid. But you can be maybe a little more generous with the ones that are walking with the Lord and they're born again and they're active in a church and they can help the church. Those are kingdom things that happen when that happens. Now they have money, and I've got a friend that's got a company worth $250 million at least, and he's leaving it to 2 unsaved people. I'm thinking, man, what could God do with that money? And why are you leaving it to unsaved people? So something that my wife and I have struggled with. We've got a plan. This is what we want to do. But you've been generous with God all your life. Be generous with him when you pass. Keep your life free from the love of money. Be content with what you have. For he said, I will never leave you and I will never forsake you. So that is the end of estate planning. And I think we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in 5 minutes, and we'll start some Q&A.